So what we've got is Richard Ewing. Is he on the premises? Here he is. Richard and Murray Court. Is he on the premises?
He was going to be, but I haven't seen him as yet.
Okay. Richard and Murray went to the Avalon Air Show and took a lot of photos. Richard has spoken to us before. He's got an aircraft under construction at home. He'll probably tell us some more about that sometime. And he's had his head into aviation ever since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. So he knows pretty well all there is that needs to be known about aircraft, and he's going to tell us what he saw at Avalon. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, folks. Murray and I went over to Avalon. Fortunately, his young bloke lives over there, so it was free digs, and then he came back here and I went over to New Zealand with the boss. She didn't express a whole lot of interest about going to Avalon. Now, probably all of you have heard that famous little quote, there's three principal industries that mankind is involved in. The first one is the world's oldest profession. The second one is shifting dirt from one place to another and back again. And the final one is removing other members of their species from the planet. Avalon is all about removing other members of the species. So if you want to go and buy a smart bomb or a smart missile or a cruise missile, this is the place for you. We're a little disappointed with prices. $70 a day for the air show. No weekly purchase. Now, folks, Oshkosh costs $110 for a week. And this ain't Oshkosh. So, yeah, I thought they were a little rich with their charges. We didn't go every day. That's the little car that I borrowed from a guy in Victoria. That's where I parked it, off a slip road. Now, this was because I wanted to take some photographs, which you'll see. One of those was the one we had up there that was supposed to have a little Avalon Air Show tag on it. That's about 30 yards off the road, 30 metres in the new money, or thereabouts. I got back to that after standing up on a hill for a couple of hours taking some pictures, and there was a cop writing out a ticket. And I said, "We got a problem?" And he said, "Well, bloody well say so." He said, "You parked in a no parking zone." I said, "Oh, come on." I said, "Look, cars have been parking here all the time. Didn't you see the sign?" "I still can't see the sign. There's a stake hammered into the ground with no parking, which happened to be exactly parallel to me. I didn't see it." Anyway, he ranted on about all these cheapskates who didn't buy a bloody ticket and all this sort of stuff, and I said, "Woo, woo, woo." I said, "I did buy a ticket. I came out here to get out of the westerly sun to take some pictures." When I showed him the ticket, he said, "Yeah, all right, where are you from?" And I said, "Perth." And he said, "Well, you better bugger off before I change my mind." So I did. But that was the thing. They were absolutely looking for every dollar. But there you go. When we got to the place, static exhibitions, look, you know, military, very, very strong presence. Everybody else, yeah, not so much. But yeah, the RAF had got into these things, polished them up, washed them up. They looked absolutely beautiful. There were some interesting things. You can take a Jet Ranger and paint over its canopy and tell everybody that it's a UAV, an unmanned aerial vehicle. I'm led to believe that it really was, but who would know? The airline industry got a nod from Mr. Qantas. That's a brand newie, incidentally. It's a brand new 737, and they've painted that up in their old retro colour scheme. And that's just on the normal run. A whole lot better than those graffiti covered ones, but it looked pretty cool. But there wasn't a big airline presence there at all. Very, very big presence of business jets. This is the Gulfstream G650, $65 million, and you can have one of those as long as you've got more and more millions to keep it running and fueled and crewed and everything. Although I figure if you bought one of those, you'd probably want to fly it yourself, wouldn't you? If you bought one of those and let somebody else fly, it'd be like buying an ice cream and giving it to somebody else to lick it for you. Quite a few others, including the new Cirrus jet. I couldn't get a straight answer out of the guy whether it was a real one or whether it was a mock-up, so I still didn't really know. The 3-jet Falcon, even more money I believe than the 650. Jan Andy's got a little bit of time in these, quite a bit of time I believe. You can't have an air show without a C-47 oblique DC-3. There were a few of them. We didn't see them fly, but I did see some photos taken and they were airborne on different days. Given our $70, I felt a bit cheated about that. The Airbus 400, didn't see it fly. As far as I know, it didn't fly, but without a shadow of a doubt, it won the contest for how many prop blades can you stick on a hub. Count is 8. So yeah, by the time prop overhaul comes, if you've mashed up a blade, but what the heck, they're the military, they don't care. It's all on the taxpayer. The Yanks turned up with a B-52, amazing aeroplanes, seen a few of them. This one didn't fly, but they flew one in from Guam. They flew it in from Guam, did a couple of low passes, and then flew it back to Guam again. Seems a big NavX for that. For those of you that have seen that horrible video clip from the 90s where the bloke put one of these in a steep turn and turned it into a whole bunch of orange flame and noise, they've obviously got some very, very tight rules about flying displays in B-52s. Very, very conservative display. The thing that tickled all of us was those wrinkles in the skin. If you have a look just forward of the leading edge there, they tell me that when you fly it, they all come straight. You wonder at a 50-year-old aeroplane how many times it gets wrinkled and goes straight till the nose falls off, but they say it's right. If you ever get to Duxford and go and have a look at the American Air Museum, they've got one there, and boy oh boy, it's got more wrinkles than me, so yeah, it's a pretty old aeroplane, I guess. Those engines, which sort of didn't look nearly as big as we thought, they're really, really big engines. Peter Yates tells a wonderful story of tooling around in the States when a B-52 called up to announce that he had one engine shut down and he was going to make a precautionary approach with one engine out, and somebody said, oh geez, not the dreaded 7-engine landing. They brought the F-22, but apparently their display pilot was off fighting the bad guys, so there was no display. We didn't realise how seriously the Yanks took this, but there was the F-22, I'm just trying to think of what else was in their little compound. But they had a couple of the local cops there, and I talked to one and said, they'd take the security seriously. He said, you wouldn't believe. He said, it's just about an event if somebody finishes up in there. Apparently the refueler had to refuel the other aeroplane. I think it might have been a U-2. And he just hopped over the fence to see where he could put the refueling tanker. And yeah, they all but took him away in chains under gun. Nice aeroplane, seen it fly in Oshkosh, does a wonderful display. Very disappointed that they didn't do the display. The air show, mostly military stuff. A couple of aerobatic acts. These couple of fellas, if I remember rightly, were from the UK. They were a 2-aircraft act, and much like most of those acts with extras and caps and so forth, I was really quite pleased to be on the ground. These exercises that they do, inside and outside snap rolls, multiple snap rolls, tumbling manoeuvres. Yeah, not quite my thing, but certainly all the aerobatic freaks, they really love the stuff. Very, very clever people. That's the second of those. And yeah, a very, very neat act. They did it very well working in pairs. The second aerobatic act was even more so. Some of you might have heard of Jurgis Kairis, I think his name is. Flies this little Sukhoi with an enormous radial engine. Seems to sort of lift it up and then just go straight up. It's got the most amazing performance and a roll rate to leave your eyeballs behind. There he is in a formation takeoff with a much modified Pitts. The other aircraft in the formation was an extra which was loaned to a little American lass by the name of Melissa Pemberton, very, very talented lady. And this was their crazy flying formation routine. You can see there one of the handicaps of Avalon in that the flight line is west of the crowd line. So particularly in the afternoon, you're battling with the photography because it tends to get a little silhouette-y. The VIPs, we all had a chuckle about this because it depends obviously how important you are in the government as depending how you get to go. You get to drive yourself, you're not very important at all. You get to come in a limo if you're pretty important. You get to come in a King Air 200 if you're very important. And of course if you're the boss, you get to come in the 737. Guess which one Uncle Tony came in. Sometimes even the Top Guns stuff up, and we all had a little grin on our face. That landing turned out as badly as the approach looked. He put it down on the nose wheel, which leapt up in the air, and then he put it down, yeah, sort of semi-tidally the second time. But it was nice to see that even the good guys make a muck up every now and then. Makes us peasants feel a little bit better about the number of times we do. Helicopters came and flushed out all the bad guys. This is the Apache, exceedingly capable, if somewhat ugly looking aeroplane, but they cost a lot of money and they do a very good job, so the boys tell me. The Navy turned up with a couple of squirrels and they put a bit of a display together. The stars of the show to me were these fellas. From New Zealand and some local, was a set of World War I aeroplanes. Now, I don't claim any great credit for knowing the names of all of these, but every single one of them was just beautifully turned out. Notwithstanding, there's quite a few of them that looked as though they'd be more than a handful to fly. But these two were the RE-8 and the Bristol Fighter, I think. Yeah. If anybody wants to argue, that's right, I got it right, thanks Bob. Okay, there was a problem. They were a long way away and they flew down the crowd line, which was the runway. It had to be on the other side of the runway. So anybody who didn't have a sort of fairly decent lens had a pretty tough time getting some good photos of them. That was actually a long, long way away. This fella gave us some quite good pictures, and again, just beautifully turned out. These blokes were, this was the best chance we had when they were all on the landing approach. I'm open to nomination. Bob, you know what that is? A Holtz?
PZ, Holtz.
Holtz.
I think so, PZ, ALS or something like that.
So there you go, it starts PZ, so anything like that I can't pronounce it anyway, so there we go. Right. This is an Italian, he said, because he could see the flag on the back. And all of these came from the Omaka area in New Zealand. This little bloke was quite interesting. It was a German biplane of some description. It looked like a real handful. I was trying to see some dihedral on that wing, but there isn't very much. So I think that would occupy your complete attention. These guys, incidentally, did not land on the runway. They had a dirt strip alongside, which I thought was very, very good thinking. The engine made a big cough and it spat all that smoke out. We all assumed it was on the display. He was coming into land, and it didn't actually stop, but the smoke stopped shortly after that. So I'm not sure whether it's part of the display, but it got my attention. If it wasn't part of the display, I'm sure it got his. This little fella, just again, beautifully turned out. Love the pilot's scarf. There's the very appropriate World War I scarf. It's just about big enough to get wrapped around the tail skin. Everybody knows the Fokker triplane. There's the Red Baron, again, no dihedral, a rotary engine that has it going every which way. You know, apparently you put left stick in and it goes up and things like that. So do I want to fly one of those? Not much, but I'm quite happy to have a look at them on the way in. There's the other one of the Fokker triplanes. It was kind of interesting taking photos because the dirt strip was actually about 2 or 3 feet lower than the runway. So if you left your photo too late, it looked like somebody landing a Fokker triplane with the gear up, which would be a kind of difficult thing to do. But these ones were on the landing, so they gave us a better look. Now, I think that's the RE8, isn't it? That one?
That's the RE8. Yeah.
Yep. And then there was the Bristol fighter. This one impressed me the most of all. It was just so beautifully turned out and magnificently made. Recreation, I believe, not actually a restoration, although they tell me they got some original bits from various old ones. The Camel, I think, and again, looked like a very, very challenging aeroplane to fly. The SE5, yes? Yep, good. If I sound a little less than confident about these, I am.
With the rotary engines, they had no throttle, and you put a blip switch to cut them out, and they go blip, blip, and the announcer said that guy with faulty engine better land. Did you hear him say that?
No, I didn't. Yeah, there was a little comment if you didn't hear that, and that was that these things, of course, don't have a throttle. You start it up and it's full black, and all they've got is a little blipping switch which turns the ignition off. So when you're taxiing these things, you hear this thing going burp, 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 burp. And when he's coming into land, it's the same thing. As Bob said, one of the announcers said, well, that guy's got a bit of a problem with his ignition, so perhaps you ought to put it down. So he knew a lot less than me. There's a little German monoplane, and that looked like the biggest handful of them all, but he seemed to handle it okay. No, not a lot of wing at all. There's not much holding that up. And that's the Pup, and that's a local. That one lives at Point Cook. Look, they were just beautiful. And we got to look at them on the ground. They were beautifully turned out, quite made the show. And the only disappointment was that they did circuits all the way out to the right, out to the west. And as they were coming past the crowd, in many instances, all you got was the belly of the aeroplane. Now, I know the Brits, when we talk to them, they're all very conscious of doing what they call a topside pass. So they bank the aeroplane over, put a little opposite rudder and fly past the crowd with the aeroplane to topside for photos. Well, I did write a little letter suggesting that they talk to the Brits and find out about topside passes. The Historic Aircraft Restoration Society brought this Catalina. Just absolutely fabulous. I don't think they operate it on water. I haven't seen any pictures of it on water. But yeah, absolutely lovely aeroplane. Once again, long way out to the west, so anybody who didn't have a really big lens had a bit of a battle with that. And there she is just about to touch down. As I say, this is an amphib, obviously, and I'm not sure that they run it off water. And that's understandable because obviously you put these things into water and there's much, much more maintenance to do. They also brought this one, the Neptune. I didn't realise how old these things were, but they sort of date back to about 1945, 1946, so it makes them as old as me. That's, again, beautifully turned out. And there she is sort of doing some circuits, once again, a long way out, and finally coming back into land. And I think everybody was enormously impressed. The only thing we really missed was the Constellation. in past years they've always brought the Connie to Avalon, and that's a particularly beautiful aeroplane. They brought the Caribou that they've inherited from the RAF. I heard many people saying, and Ken would relate to this, that the display was a good deal more conservative than the RAF boys used to put on. I used to watch these things at RAF Pierce, coming in and landing just on the nose wheel, and yeah, doing all sorts of incredible bits and pieces without breaking the aeroplane, which was something else we were very impressed. But yeah, we did miss the Connie and the display on the Caribou. And there she is coming into land. He did, however, demonstrate the land and reversing, so that was very clever, doing a 3-point turn on the runway, which was particularly impressive. That's the bloke that turned up from Guam, as you can see. It was alleged to do, or it was listed to do, a high-speed pass and low-speed dirty pass, but on this day it did 2 high-speed passes, so we didn't complain about that, that was fine. But it certainly seemed a long way to come for a little 5-minute show. There he is, just disappearing off on his second pass, and then he just peeled off and disappeared, we assume, back to Guam. The P3 Orion, good old Lockheed Electra, much modified. One feathered. Anybody know why it's always the port outer that they feather? Every display I've ever seen of an Orion, when they feather one, it's always the port outer. And I've no idea why, but I've got photos from Pierce, other photos from Avalon, and yet one engine feathered. Might be some hydraulic pumps or something like that. Okay, the Temora Museum bought their Sabre. How do you like that fairly agricultural looking smoke pipe run down the side of it? It's a really flash looking aeroplane. It's done beautifully, but the smoke pipe looked as though they got to the very end of it and said, oh geez, we need to have a smoke pipe. Here, put this down the side and paint it silver, except where it passes the roundel and the black stripe. But that aside, we forgive them for that. It looked good. If you're not aware of it, this is the last Sabre that flew for the RAF in the 90s. The Temora Aviation Museum put up its hand and said, look, we're prepared to operate it for you out of Temora if you want to lend it to us and we'll bring it back to airworthy. And that's exactly what happened. So it's crewed by Temora and it's maintained by Temora, but it actually belongs to the RAAF Memorial. Yeah.
Just the thing, Richard, that was the last flight of that aeroplane in Australia.
So I believe they've got a problem with the ejector seat or something?
They've run out of parts for the ejector seat, and Martin Baker recently had to review their entire stock of ejector seat parts and litigation, and particularly after there was 2 red arrows killed in
Oh, right.
Ejection seat malfunctions. So they said in the foreseeable future, no answer at the moment. That was the last flight.
What a shame. So they took it back to Temora?
Yep.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, I do remember I went over to Temora with Dave Clean and his aeroplane some years ago, and we were looking at it. It was getting close to being finished, and I said, how are you going for crew? And the guy chuckled and he said, if you got a rank less than wing commander, don't even bother asking. So, yeah, obviously they were pretty keen. The Gloucester Meteor, we nicked that one from the Brits. Anyway, the fella from Temora went over to the UK, looked at it and said, yeah, we'll have that. So they paid for that, brought it back again, and I believe at the moment that's the only Mark 8 that is airworthy. He's repainted it as Hailstorm, which was flown with 77 Squadron during the war. These guys teamed up with a classic Hornet. I learnt here the difference between a classic Hornet and the new one, the Rhino, and that's their historic fly past. There they are on landing. There's the Meteor coming back, the Sabre. I only got it on that side with the agricultural smoke pipe, but now I'm really pleased that I've got some photographs of it in the air. And there's the classic Hornet. You'll see, if you look at the engine intakes, they're round. When you see the later one, yeah, they're square. C-17, that was one of the ones I took where I had to talk myself out of a parking ticket. Very, very spirited display, and if you catch it in the right place, it looks pretty racy and a good looking aeroplane, but the truth of the matter is, after you've got all those sort of photographs and you have a look at it, it really is a bit of a fat blob. But it does get along very well, lightly loaded, extremely agile, and he did a very fascinating climbing turn with about a 70-degree angle of bank, which had us all hoping that he was going to make it, but no dramas at all. And then he set up for the landing, turned it into a go-round, and if ever there's an attitude that shows the fairly dumpy lines of the aeroplane, that's that one there. Came in for a short field landing, whereas everybody taxied up the end of the runway, turned around, not this guy. He did the classic three-point turn partway down the runway. The Little Hawk, an incredibly noisy aeroplane. Obviously, that's the lead-up aeroplane for fast jets. And he flew a good display, but a long, long way away. That's the only photograph I got of the Hawk. This remarkably colourless PC-9, when they had a little exercise that had the helicopters hunting out the bad guys and the FA-18s coming in and throwing explosives out, he was the forward air controller. So that was quite neat. These three guys put on a great display. These are three Rhinos, the new 18. You can see they're all two-seaters. They flew a formation with the new, I've forgotten what they call it, but it's an Airbus A300. Yeah, we're nearly there. End of the page, promise. They didn't actually hook up, but they held station beautifully, and the Airbus guy said to us, that was a hell of a lot of fun, you know. We usually do that up at 30,000 feet. It was quite neat tooling around there at 1,000 feet. And then these guys then took off and beat the place up. They had a lot of fun pitching out flares. I hate to think how much they cost, because they threw a lot of them around, but again, they're the military. There's your tax money going up there. Another couple of those, and they were just doing their thing. And then they turned around, came into land, and if you look at those intakes, you can see a very, very square look about it. Oops. Taxied in, would you believe, in formation. So they all formed up, folded up their wings, and taxied back in formation. This fellow then came in, the big Airbus, and he put it down very, very neatly as well. You can see a very polished performance, slight crosswind, just touching down 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the nose. We all thought it was very, very good indeed. The last act on the page were the Singaporean display team, the Black Aces or something they called themselves. Very, very effective. Two-ship formations. That's their high alpha pass, and that really is a high alpha. They certainly tucked in nice and tight to one another, but as I understand it, these are the Singaporean Red Arrows, and full marks to them. Did a good job. This is their canopy to canopy formation. They do sort of set it off to one side. That was the one that really had everybody's breath taken away, and that was belly to belly. However, you can see the guy on the top and the guy on the bottom looking out, and they were actually stepped off by quite enough distance to see themselves. These blokes then brought them back into land. Good looking aeroplane, and boy, they carry, well, they're capable of carrying some fuel. Exactly what was in that belly tank, I don't know, maybe nothing. But yeah, good looking aeroplane, beautifully painted up. That's number 6 coming in. And that was the show. Thanks, folks.